And welcome once again to the Duct Tape Studios. I'm Jeff McAleer, your host here at the Gaming Gang channel. Thanks for joining me once again. And yes, I am wearing glasses once again. I'm just taking a few days off, giving my eyes a rest for my contact lenses. So if you don't recognize me, it really is me. Just very rarely ever wear glasses and almost never on camera. Anywho, Troll Lord Games Month rocks on as today I am going to share my review of Castle Zagyg Yggsburgh from the aforementioned Troll Lord Games. This is the reprint edition that I am reviewing. It is written by Gary Gygax with artwork provided by Jeffrey Catherine Jones and Peter Bradley. This 256-page hardcover is available now, carries an MSRP of $59.99. You can grab just the PDF alone over at Drive-Thru RPG for the rocking price of $15.99. That's a sweet deal on the PDF. All right, all that said, let's swing on over to the other camera because here I've got Yggsburgh for Castle Zagyg. A few things I want to mention before we get stuck in. First of all, my friends over at Troll Lord Games were kind enough to provide me with this review copy. But neither I nor anyone else affiliated with the Gaming Gang has received any other sort of compensation for me to share this review with you. These days, it's important you know that. We're also not going to look at each and every page of the volume, but I do want to give you a good feel for what you're going to find inside Yggsburgh. And then lastly, this is a Castles and Crusades book, even though it does not have the Castles and Crusades trade dress on it. And I think that might confuse some people. And I think that's something that happens with some of the Troll Lord Games releases. The trade dress is different, or sometimes it doesn't say Castles and Crusades. So some folks might be confused. This is a Castles and Crusades book, which also means that you could easily utilize this with just about any edition of Dungeons and Dragons up to 3.5. And you can also utilize this with just about any retroclone or OSR release out there built upon Dungeons and Dragons. Very nice. So you don't have to be a castle keeper running Castles and Crusades to be able to utilize this book, but it's important you know this is for Castles and Crusades. And I'm a big fan of Castles and Crusades, so I'm very happy to see this back in print. So what we're going to see is 3 different sections in this volume, which are going to detail the history and the setting and the culture of the area around the fortress town of Yggsburgh. Then we're going to get into detail about Yggsburgh, and then we will get into some information about the region, the environs around Yggsburgh. Now, I'm going to mention this book is absolutely packed with content. It really, really is. And there is literally years and years of role-playing adventuring in this single volume alone. Tons of adventure hooks, tons of encounters, tons of detailed locations and NPCs. Castle keepers and game masters are really getting a lot out of this book. Now, as far as Castle Zagyg itself, there is absolutely no information about Castle Greyhawk. I mean, Zagyg. Yeah, I meant Zagyg. That was broken down into volumes that were coming in the future for this series. Unfortunately, Gary Gygax passed away after, I think, the first 2 releases were in print, and then a 3rd release came out from Troll Lord Games. I'll be very honest, I'm not real familiar with the history of Castle Zagyg, but I think that was the case. And then Troll Lord Games lost the rights to publish Gary Gygax's work. So this is the reprint edition because the Troll Lords have been working with the executor of the Gary Gygax estates as far as getting things in print that he created. And what the troll lords are looking to do is prove to the executor of the estate or executors of the estate that there is value still in Gary Gygax's work. And this is a prime example of it. So the game plan is hopefully to eventually kickstart everything from Castle Zagyg. And I'm excited and I'm really hopeful that that is the case. So as you can see, we're going to start off. Once again, we had the history, the setting, culture about the area. Then we're going to get into details about the fortress town itself with various different locations. A few things I want to mention is, first of all, this is pretty traditional high fantasy a la AD&D. So as far as an example, in the region, there are raiders. Those raiders are orcs, they're goblins. So pretty standard stuff. We don't see this stray too far from traditional role-playing high fantasy, which is fine. A lot of people love that. But as I mentioned, this is sort of Gary Gygax's original campaign, which we all know was not called Castle Zagyg. Just so you know. So if you are familiar with some of the TSR releases as far as setting info for AD&D, then you'll know what you're getting into. So it's important for me to point that out. Should also mention that this is written by Gary Gygax. So if you are not a fan of Gary Gygax's work, this isn't going to change your mind. And yes, there are people out there who have, let's be honest, rightfully claimed that Gary Gygax would use a $20 word when a 20-cent word would work just as well. There's a bit of that in here, but it's not the high Gygaxian that we joke around about with Advanced Dungeons and Dragons by any stretch. Although I will say that hopefully you've got a healthy vocabulary or a thesaurus nearby when you start diving into Yggsburgh. There is so much going on in this volume, though. If you are looking for a large town, a fortified town for you to drop into just about any traditional high fantasy campaign, this is perfect. It really, really is. Something I will point out, though, is some of the NPCs get a good amount of detail. A lot of them don't. A lot of them get maybe the stat blocks, maybe they get a mention. I would have liked to have seen a bit more detail about all of the NPCs just to make the game master, castle keeper's life easier. Is it a huge quibble I've got? Not really, but it is noticeable. You will see as you're reading through, you'll encounter some sections where you're like, oh, hey, I'd really like to know a lot more about this family or this group, this faction. And then you just don't get that information. Sorry to say. But this, once again, is just jam-packed with adventuring. So as an example, this section here is the third of the three major sections. It's the environs of Yggsburgh. And as you can see, we have these adventure hooks that are fairly detailed. And we had this also in the Yggsburgh section too. And in fact, many of the important locations in the town get 1 or 2 pages devoted to them. So it isn't just, oh, a paragraph here, a paragraph there. We get quite a bit of detail, and I like it quite a lot. I will also point out this is an entertaining read. So this is not really dry. Now, granted, it's not conversational, which I'm fine with, especially when you're looking at a book that's really game master or castle keeper facing. I don't necessarily want that sort of conversational tone in the book, but This isn't just case point, and so forth. Like this a lot. Although, once again, this is pretty standard high fantasy. So if you are not a fan of that, if you want things to be a lot more freewheeling or have tieflings and dragonborn and things like that, which actually didn't exist in D&D when Gygax was involved with it, you're probably going to want to look elsewhere. So we do have some really detailed appendices to finish up the book. So we've got developing Yggsburgh as far as fleshing the town out with locations that have not been keyed on the map that's included. And we get some information about various different businesses. We get crime and punishment in Yggsburgh. I like that section quite a bit. Probably the most useful, or two of the most useful appendices, are the random encounters and events tables. So we do have it broken up, urban, and then the environs of the Yggsburgh area. And as you can see, we get into a lot of detail, like the town square, temple grounds, small tavern, common room. And my favorite part is we actually start getting into more detail about these encounters. So with random encounters, a lot of times with fantasy role-playing games, especially those that are essentially retro clones or built, say, on AD&D or Dungeons and Dragons, a lot of times, as far as those random encounters, we'll get maybe a couple of sentences. Not at all. We get adventure hooks for loads of this. I absolutely love it. Very, very cool. Like it quite a lot. As far as the production quality of the book, very solid throughout. Artwork is fine. I mean, there's some pieces that are pretty good. There's others it's sort of like, okay, all right. As far as the presentation, yes, this is old school. Get our 2 columns, pretty standard as far as that goes. It doesn't look all old and creaky though. Like if you look at some of the old AD&D modules, the presentation is really looking ancient. That's not the case here. But once again, this does have a pretty standard, traditional fantasy role-playing sort of presentation. We get a bestiary with some new monsters as well. We get some cool optional rules, especially the optional rule for wear and tear on armor. I like that quite a bit. I could possibly see myself using that if I were running Castles and Crusades. So lots of goodies inside this book. Once again, sadly, it says Castle Zagyg on the cover, and up in the corner, there's nothing about the castle. In fact, it's mentioned that if the player characters start approaching the castle, that there's all this fog and mist. You can't see anything. I thought that was kind of funny. We also will wrap up with a poster map. Sadly, this poster map was attached with that kind of rubbery adhesive that peels off. So it did stain the map. That's a bummer. But we get, on one side, we get the town of Yggsburgh. I'll try to unfold it without tearing it. Just kind of give you a quick peek there. And then on the back, we'll get a hex map of the environs surrounding Yggsburgh and the East Mark. And that is a peek inside the reprint edition of Castle Zagyg Yggsburgh from Trollord Games. So let's swing on over to the other camera. I'm going to share some final thoughts and give this a review score. So as I mentioned, there's a lot to really like about Castle Zagyg Yggsburgh, outside the fact that there's really no information about the castle. But this was the first volume in a proposed multiple volume series, so I can understand that. As I mentioned too, there is literally, and I do understand how to use that word, years of adventuring that's packed into this volume. There are so many ideas that game masters and castle keepers can draw from to really bring this region and town to life. Now, once again, I'm going to point out if you are not a fan of Gary Gygax's work, this isn't going to change your mind. You're not going to suddenly say, I've been wrong all these years. No, absolutely not. And once again, this is pretty standard, traditional, high fantasy role playing. Once again, I will mention Gary Gygax was famous for having his home campaign, which was not called Castle Zagyg. And this is essentially that campaign with some new names, new locations, new things going on. I'm not trying to imply that it is just simply a port of an old TSR release. Not at all. But it doesn't push the envelope either. So if you are into the kind of traditional AD&D sort of fantasy setting, you will enjoy this. If you're looking for a bit more, it's probably not going to suit your needs as well as I would like. So as someone who's always enjoyed the works of Gary Gygax, I certainly will give this a pretty high recommendation. So on a scale of 0 to 10, I give Castle Zagyg Yggsburgh's reprint edition an 8 out of 10. I like it quite a bit. I could certainly see myself using it if I were running Castles and Crusades. That's it for this time out. If you like the video, by all means, please give it a quick thumbs up. Subscribe to the Gaming Gang channel if you haven't already. And if you do subscribe, don't forget, ring that bell. It'll not only let you know when I share videos such as this review, it'll also inform you when my live stream, the Gaming Gang Dispatch, airs Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday evenings at 7 p.m. Central, right here on YouTube. Of course, when you're not watching videos here on the channel, be sure to visit thegaminggang.com for all latest in tabletop gaming news, reviews, and a whole lot more you are not going to find on YouTube. You know the drill. Get your geek on at thegaminggang.com. Thank you very much for watching. Once again, I'm Jeff McAleer. And until I see you next time, I certainly hope all of you get to enjoy plenty of great gaming with your gang.